Hello there voltage modular people, PoohBear here and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a technical overview of GaToR. Actually going to do quite a deep dive into this device. I'm very quickly going to go over just a few new features for the advanced users, and then I said I will go over them, so don't try and keep up with me if you're new to this device. I will go over all these options again. So very quickly for the advanced users, we've now got obviously a trigger option at the top here. So the trigger input can be just above 0 volts to trigger it now. As standard, if you click it on, it's your standard voltage modular above 2.5 volts to trigger it, and below will reset it. But now we can go above 0 and 0 and below to reset it. Down here we've got a new button. This used to be steps, so this output here used to output whatever steps was active, or the steps. So in active mode, it'll do exactly that. As it goes through, it's going to send out 5 volts, nothing, 5 volts, nothing, 5 volts. And it holds the voltage open so it doesn't drop it. We've now got one called steps, and that's just basically a simple trigger. So it's going to trigger on every single step it's actually got within the GaToR. So this step mode really makes pure sense when we link the GaToRs together. We've got a first, so when the very first step is activated, it's going to hold that signal open until it moves on to the second step. We've got a last, so it's going to hold that one open when it hits it, and obviously when it completes it. And we've got an end. Now the end, again, the end actually only does work when you've got your GaToRs linked up together, because obviously what's going to happen is when it gets to not the last step, when it's finished the last step, it goes into what we call an end mode, so it holds that signal high, and it doesn't matter how many GaToRs you go through, only when it comes back to that first step does it drop it to a low voltage. If you really needed something like that on like the local mode, we're not using the step mode, then also you can put it onto first, because it's exactly the same thing. When we finish this step, because there's no end really, we go straight back to the first step. It'd be the equivalent of the trigger. We've now got two new ports called random local, so it's obviously going to randomize locally, and this is a global random port, so that will random all your GaToRs which are linked together. And obviously this is just a box standard kind of trigger that you put in there. As usual, just in case you might miss the documentation, when I very first wrote this device, there was a little Easter egg in there to do with the randomization, but it's not really an Easter egg now because I've documented it. So double clicking the PoohBear will actually randomize it, and a right mouse click, if you had multiples linked up, it would actually randomize everything all together. Okay, so for everyone else, welcome to GaToR. So what is GaToR? Why did I build it? And what kind of uses does it really have? So GaToR is a very simple device, really, at the end of the day. It's also very complex, but we'll get into that in a minute. Which is quite simple. If the gate's open, it's going to let data through, and it doesn't care what the type of data is, from audio, pitch data, gate data, it doesn't care. It'll just let it through, and then obviously when the gate's closed, it won't let it through. It is that simple. It's either open or it's closed. It's going to let the data through or not. GaToR was originally written because I wrote a device called Store and Forward, and Store and Forward is like a step sequencer, and in my step sequencer I didn't, because it is a quick way of getting data in, it's very fast, there wasn't a way of having rests. So I thought, hey, that's no problem. If I've got 8 steps in my step sequencer which are coming out, I want it to come out, and I want to come down here and say, oh, I don't want step number 7 to play, so it'd be like a rest, and off we go. Now my store and forward can store up to 999 steps. So I thought, well, I also want a device where I'm not limited, you know, because there's so many kind of, especially step sort of sequences where you are limited, you know, 8, 16, 32, 64, that's what they tend to be. And I think I've seen one at 128, but that's very unusual. And GaToR itself can actually go from 1 step, so you can take it all the way down to 1 step, which you might think, hey, 1 step doesn't make sense, but I'll talk about that in a second, all the way up to, well, however many you wish to actually wire up. If you want 999 steps, you can. If you want 2,000 steps, you can. It all comes down to if your system can truly handle it, to be perfectly honest. And so coming back to why would we turn this down and only have 1 step? Well, because you can link two gators together quite easily, as I just say, and you can have 8 on one and 1 on here to give you 9 steps. There's nothing stopping you having 2 gators and having 5 on one and 4 on the other, or having 3 gators and having 3 steps on each. You know, the configuration's down to how you actually see fit. Now, when I also built this device, in my own head, I thought, right, I could have like 6 or 7 or 10 of these gators. I don't want to be spending there having to wire up a reset on every single one. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. What can I do to make the wiring up of these very, very quickly? And this is what this global section down here is all about. And I will go into detail and we will show it. But as far as I care, I think, you know, you can link up quite a few gators very, very quickly indeed. So at the top, we've got a simple trigger. So a trigger, it's either going to be above 0 volts or above 2.5 volts. So for the moment, I'm just going to quickly just wire up this tri-gate. And so obviously when I ever click go, it's actually going to start activating this and it's going to go through its steps. And it's a simple case of we've got these buttons and I can just click on them. As simple as that. So as it goes onto this step, there's nothing, that port is closed. As soon as I go on there, this port's open. So any data which is coming into this in is coming down and going straight to that out. And I call this sort of side local mode. So this is will happen obviously when this is in local mode. And this data can also go out of global if we're linked up. And we'll go, as I said, I'll go through that linked a bit in a bit. Reset just basically just resets this back to the top. It doesn't reset anything else. It's just to do with which step we're on. And in fact, when you do a reset, it will actually move you back to a 0 step, which doesn't really exist. And in fact, I'm just going to, rather than wire this up, I'm just going to put this to this bus. So that's number 1, which is going through this triglen. So when I hit go, you can see it looks like there's nothing activated. That's because it's gone to like a step 0, a secret step. So when I hit go, it's going to go to the first step and activate it, so on and so forth. Nice and straightforward there. Step knob, so we can actually adjust and say how many steps we really want. As I say, it doesn't matter if you've got several gators wired up and they're all different step lengths. It really doesn't matter at all. Now we've got this little activate and we've got a signal coming out of this activate. And it varies depending on the mode. So as I say, if I quickly wire this up, say over to here, we've got up here, it's telling me I've got a 5 volt signal at the moment because that's that step's actually activated. And if I click on go and, oh, it's, let me just take that off. I've got a feeling to hit a reset. Got ourselves a 5 volt and now it's dropped to a 0 volt and then it's going to go back to a 5 volt and it's going to stay at a 5 volt. It won't actually drop back down because they're both 5 volts. That's what that's going to do. Step mode is literally like counting the steps. So every time, so there it is, it's actually done it and dropped it already and it's taken just 1 sample. So even though that's not activated, it still fires it off. It's just saying, hey, this is step. So every time I see a step, I'm going to fire it off, I'm going to fire it off. And as I said, in this kind of mode, it doesn't make too much sense because you could just use your trigger data in a way coming into whatever you're using, coming in here. And even though I call this trigger data, by the way, it doesn't matter if it's a trigger or a gate. So you can have a gate which lasts for an hour. It will still work absolutely fine in here. So yeah, this makes more sense when you've actually got multiple gators in a linked mode to what the step's really doing. First, as I say, I'm going to scroll. In fact, let's go off. There we go. There's our 5 volt. As soon as we step off, it stays down. Oh, and by the way, it doesn't matter if this is not active. When it hits the first step, it's going to hold that 5 volts, and it'll hold that 5 volts there definitely until we move off it. And then we've got last, which is obviously the same sort of thing. So when it gets to this last step, we're going to see a new one come in. There it is. And by the way, what we're looking at here on this meter, down this side, these numbers here, these are the samples. This is how long we've actually held a particular voltage for, and this is the actual voltage. So the very top one, which is saying running, well, it's actually physically got 5 volts physically coming out of this bit of wire right at this very moment until I hit my go button and it's dropped it, and I held it for that many samples. And I'll say the nice one here is the end one, again, which we'll demonstrate a little bit later. Randomize, so obviously we can have a very simple randomization going on in here. So whenever I hit the trigger, we can randomize it. This is a randomizer as well, but the big difference is when we start winding up multiple GaToRs, you'll actually see that working. And we've got a global, as a global is equivalent of sending. Let's actually start wiring some up, and then you can see how this global will actually work. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I'm just going to make a couple of copies. Might as well just do a couple of copies. And I'm just going to turn that bus off. I'm going to turn that bus off as well. So at the moment, these aren't linked together. I'm going to just take this out, put it into this in, this out into this in, and that out into this in. They're all linked up. We've now got some lovely green lights. But at the moment, nothing's going to actually work. So if I was to give this a bit of trigger data now, nothing still is going to work. And the reason nothing's going to work is because it doesn't know which GaToR to start on. Yes, we may say, hey, what about that up there? It's like, yeah, but it still doesn't know, because even though we can, this is the brilliant thing about GaToR, even though we're putting the pulse in there, we could actually say, hey, I want this one here to start first. And so to do that, you simply have to click on the master. So every, depending on your channel numbers, so obviously I can change these channel numbers because I could obviously have another group of these on a different set of channels, but one of them has to have the master selected. I've tried to be a little bit clever that when we select, say, another master, it sort of works itself out. It says, hey, I'm the master now, so you can't be, so we can't start in two positions at the same time. So it does try and adjust itself. But there's also quite a bit of back-end logic that if I plug certain things in and unplug them, it will actually disable the master, so you've got to come back in again and actually enable the master. So now we've got the master enabled, or let's say I'm going to select that one. As soon as I hit my go button, this one's going to become the active one. It's going to come down and it's going to move across to this one. Then it's going to go from here over to that one because it's following the link lights around, and then back to this one again. So even though this has got the trigger, this is starting it. We've got a reset here. So if I was to say, oh, let's go over to this one here, when I hit my reset, it's actually going to go through the whole system. So they've all reset, and now it's actually sitting up in this one here, because that happens to be the master. To be perfectly honest, what I tend to do is, if that is my trigger coming in, I will make this one the master. Now, because we're in master mode, whatever data we've got coming through and coming out, or coming in, will actually come out of one of these globals. So these globals will have all the same data. So I could actually say, oh, I'm going to nick that global there, and let's push that global. In fact, let's just dewire that one. Now, at the moment, we've got nothing coming in, so I'm just going to right click, and I'm just going to grab, I've got a little bit of CV data kicking around in the back end, so I'm going to use that. So when I click and go, and we're moving, because this is now the master, you can see this is whizzing off doing loads and loads of things. I'm going to go on to the next step, and it's stopped, go. And if you notice, this is all coming out of this global out. So this data is getting passed through. This is processing that data and that trigger onto this one. And in fact, what we should do, I'm just going to right mouse click on the Pooh, and you can see I'm just randomizing all of these at the same time. So it'll make a bit more sense. So let's hit my go again, just to demonstrate. So that's quite an important step, that you only have to have one global out. And this is what I mean by limited wiring. We can have a lot going on, and we can have limited wiring. Now, one of the things I do a lot with my GaToRs is, from storing forward, one of the bits of information I take out of it is actually the gate data itself. Now, what I found I was doing, and I'm just going to quickly put that back to off. What I found myself doing was, I'd go, well, I need gate to trigger, and I need gate, because I'm pushing my gate through, and then I'm going to take my gate out to go off and activate or turn a sound on or off. And this is what I was doing. I thought, well, this is silly. So this is what this link is, and at the moment it's saying link off. If I turn it on, I can just throw that away. So in this port here, it's going to obviously send the data to its out. Because we're in linked mode, and this is linked mode, it's also going to send it out of the globals. But it's also going to pass its data across and come down and activate doing the steps. It'll also pass it over to these and activate these steps if it needs to. And I haven't got a master, if you notice, so because I switched some things around, it doesn't know which one's the master, so it's going to select a master again. And here we go. So I've now got just one wire coming through and controlling everything. So another big party trick about GaToR, and this is quite it's quite clever, if I can say so myself, is the fact that we can have different inputs on different GaToRs. We can have a different pulse, and we can share a mixture. And what I mean by sharing a mixture, well, you saw here, I could have had, say, some kind of audio coming into the in, which would be passed down the system, and I had a pulse. If on this second GaToR, I just had a different piece of information coming on that in, I can still use this pulse to pulse it, but I'm now using my own input to do something. And then on this one, I could just use the pulse. So this is pulsing at, say, a different speed, but I'm going to use this input. So it always takes the input and the pulse or the trigger from the previous GaToR, obviously how you wire it up. So that's why it's best to wire these up in order so you don't get yourself confused. So it'll always go backwards and always go backwards. So as I said, I've got myself a storing forward set up over the other side, and I've got some different speeds set up. So this one's set to 8ths, and this one I'm going to set up to, well, I'll leave that there for the moment. I won't actually set that one up just yet. And I'm going to put link to on, so I'm going to use that data. And so let's do a reset so we know we're back at the start. So this is me manually going through. Now when I hit my next gate, it's going to move on to this GaToR, and now it's going to go off running. It happens to be 8, it's going to finish this one, and it's going to go through to that one, and then it's going to wait for me to hit my thing again. So there it goes, whizzing off and back to the beginning again. So now I've got control because obviously I've got the link on and I've got that control here. And that's the beautiful thing, you know, as well. So it doesn't have to be a pulsed trigger. It, you know, as you can see, I'm taking my time in between. So it can be totally kind of sort of random kind of triggers which are coming in. This happens to be more obviously pulsed, which is absolutely fine. And again, you know, as I said, I could put this link on and I'm going to right click, and I happen to have this one set to, this one here, set to quarters. So this is me doing it manually. This is now going to 8, and now this is going through in quarters. Hey, excellent stuff. So other usage for GaToR is it's brilliant at doing clock divides, and you can do quite offset and quite random clock dividing with it. So I've actually got one storing forward at the moment, and we can go and visit it over here. Here it is, which happens to be running. It's taken the gate out, which happens to be running at 16ths. I've got it going through this GaToR here, and as you can see, every other one. So because everyone's highlighted, that means I've equivalently taken the 16, turned it into 8s, because then I'm taking that out. So it's just sort of changed the way that data is working. And this one here, as you can see, and by the way, this step could be moved down, so it's just showing 2 steps, so it just shows them 2. Like this one here, I've actually moved it to 4. That's going to give me quarters. You may notice that these aren't linked up. They're on the same channel. They're not linked up. So even though this might not be linked up, it's actually going to share the same pulse or the same input, depending on how you configure it here at the top. And if you notice, these can go out of sync. So I could even have this on 5 steps, so it'll go way out of sync, and that's not a problem. That's why they have to have their resets. Both of them have to have the resets done, because resets is shared via the link, so we don't have the link on, so we have to each have a reset to try and get them in sync, if you need to get them in sync, that is. So that's something special you can do, and I do a lot of drums this way as well. So you think if I wire that up to this kick, in fact, can I do that? I can do that, I think. Yes, we've got ourselves a simple kick, and obviously over here is going to be a and then we can give it a heart attack by going out this one. You may notice it got a little bit of a swing on it. That's because storing forward, it's got a swinger mode, and I just happen to have that turned on as well. So it's been quite a long video, so I'm going to say thank you for watching so far. I'm just going to finish off with a small little thing. I'm going to set this one up to my 16th, so I think that's that one there. So that should be running at 16, so that should be running at 8, and that should be running there. Let's just whack these steps up. Oh, I know what I want to talk about, and I'll quickly do this now. I'm going to unlink these just for the moment. Boop, boop, boop. And one good little party trick to do with the GaToR. So at the moment, I've actually got my storing forward going, and it's got 8 steps in it. Boom, boom, boom. And actually, let's actually go and hear that. So if I was to turn this on now, and I want this to go to some sound input, maybe. Right, I'm just doing that just to quieten it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it onto 8 steps, and you can hear it going on, and obviously it's going to be the same repeating pattern, the same repeating pattern, the same repeating pattern. I've said this a number of times in some of my other videos, is when you get a step sequencer, especially with something like a GaToR, if I've got 8 steps, I am going to make GaToR 7 steps, and I'm going to remove one of the steps. So effectively, what that would mean is for my 8 steps to truly repeat themselves, the same pattern, they'll have to go through 56 separate steps. It's going to sound very similar because obviously it's an 8-step repeating pattern. So what do I mean? Let's have a look. Here's 7 steps. Very, very repeating. I'm going to remove just one. So it literally will have to go through 56 or 8 times round this to get back to where it is. Yeah, sorry, I get carried away with this sort of thing. So yeah, so that sort of thing is great, and as I say, when you start playing around with this sort of stuff, it's absolutely fantastic. You can actually do some interesting things with the linked outs as well. Right, that's really it for now. As I say, this video has gone on for a little bit longer than I expected, and I'm sorry about that, but it is quite a deep device. There's a lot going on. It's very easy to use. Trigger, set your gates, and off you go. But as I say, I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.